Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm joined by Greg Edwards, who is the CEO of CryptoStopper. Greg, how's it going today?
Good, good. Thanks for having me, Anthony.
I'm excited to chat. I'm excited to learn about you and your company. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are right now?
Yeah, so I started out as an entrepreneur in 1998 when I was 24 and started my own network consulting business at that point with really no idea about entrepreneurship or business management or leadership or anything. So really learned on the fly. I actually still own that company. That's a managed services business called Watchpoint IT. So I still own that. Actually, still have some of the original customers that were part of that company way back when, and I mostly absentee own that business at this point. And then I've started two other companies since then. One of them being Axis Backup. That is an offsite backup and disaster recovery company that I sold to a publicly traded company, and varied background in different technologies, but always within technology.
So it sounds like you were like you liked the aspect of it. You were good at doing it, and then eventually it evolved
It,
into like, hey, now I own businesses, and I run
it,
a company.
yeah. Actually, after I started the first company, read a book called The E-Myth, which is exactly that, where you think you can do it better than the other guy, and you just have some technical expertise and go hang a shingle, and before you know it, you're a business owner.
Yeah.
And luck, I think between luck and sheer persistence and determination are what made me successful in the early days, and feel like that those early days were my MBA program.
I got that. So, what are some of those? We'll sort of look at the two sides of the coin. What were some of those key learnings that you learned that you think make you a good leader now? And what are some of those, disasters, things you learned the hard way that you wish you had? So, what would you share with young leaders, things that you've learned over your career as a CEO and a president?
So I mean, I think one of the big things is transparency with your employees and making sure that that you're consistent in that transparency. So that's something that I wasn't always as transparent as I am today, and probably maybe I'm more transparent than I should be, and that becomes more difficult as you grow in the larger the company is. But I think transparency and just honesty is probably the biggest first thing. I mean, there's lots of other components that go around that, but if you start there with transparency and honesty, then everything else can fall into place as long as you manage it properly.
And you mentioned just as we were doing sort of the pre-call, like the transparency in action. Can you tell us a
Yeah,
little bit more about like some of the maybe systems or processes that you've put in place to support that being executed?
yeah. So some very actionable things that we do at CryptoStopper. One of those is a Monday morning all hands meeting. It's an update, and it's also an ask me anything session. So anything that any questions, whether it's whatever, can be, we within the company offer stock options. So that's been one thing that's been questions people have had recently. So it's ask me anything, and it's everyone gives a brief update of what their last week looked like, what are challenges going into this week, and I think that that's again feeds into that transparency of here's what I'm doing, ask me anything about it, ask me anything about what's happening within the company.
And were your previous kind of crypto shoppers relatively small team? Were your previous companies about the same size or were they bigger?
A
Or
little bit bigger. So not not I don't work well in a large corporate environment. So once we get to 20, 25 employees, I'm ready to hand the reins off and not be involved in a day-to-day
Mhm.
standpoint. It's just not my um, it's not something that I enjoy that much. There's too many constraints in place and too many just doing the same thing over and over. And I'm more of an entrepreneur and want to be developing. developing and overcoming challenges rather than doing the same thing over and over every day.
Well, I think that takes a good amount of awareness too, right? For you to know, like, hey, here's my sweet spot where I can like lead effectively. You mentioned again the transparency, the sort of like ask me anything style, where you can have that like personal connection with the employees. That's like your secret sauce. And I find what's interesting and cool about interviewing, folks like you is that everybody has a different way, and there's no right way. It's about being able to take that reflection time if you're listening to this podcast in your car and being like, I wonder if I could be more like Greg, that like I could take that and apply that. Um,
Yeah.
have you found, or dig into that ask me anything, have you found your ask me anythings have changed over sort of this COVID period? And are you guys remote now, or always
So
remote, or
we've
neither?
we have always been primarily remote. We just through necessity of being able to find the right talent. We're headquartered in um, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which I mean I love the town and love the area that we're in, but it's not the technology capital of the world for sure. And so we have employees in Colorado, Chicago, Florida, um, all over. And so through necessity, when we started the company, we were remote anyway. And so the transition through COVID has just solidified that, and that I don't know that we'll ever have, certainly won't ever have a large corporate office anywhere, and will primarily work remotely. So the other part of that question, has the ask me anything and the transparency changed at all through COVID? I mean, because we were remote already, we didn't have like a hard shift to go and make big changes. So I would say not that much. I mean, there's been times where we all are stressed out more in different kinds of anxiety and stress than we've ever had before. And so I've certainly talked about those things. And I've come into some of those meetings going, I don't know, guys, I'm having a hard time keeping my head up today. So you guys carry me today.
But it's cool that like one of my clients asked me, he's like, hey, what have you done? What can I do to develop trust among my team? And, it's again, more that transparency thing, but it sounds like because y'all are remote, you've had to build in those like communication systems in place so that it like sort of does build the trust. Or is there anything else that you explicitly do as part of your operations to keep that team like cohesiveness, tightness,
Yeah.
collaboration?
So, well, I mean, so we use some of the collaboration tools. I mean, we started out using Slack, and have actually transitioned to Microsoft Teams and have those. I mean, we eliminated email internally, and I can't say we completely eliminated it, but we stopped using email internally probably 3.5 years ago, and at that point went to Slack. And I said, if it's something you can put in Slack, put it in Slack, and don't email. And we almost entirely eliminated email as a form of internal communication, so that we have that instantaneous, hey, I've got a question about this, and it's much more conversational than it was in email. And I mean, that was out of um, need, necessity, and just pure keeping the sanity. Because as I mean, I'm sure everyone listening to this, that your inbox is just crazy. And to take that internal employee, to take that layer away, and make it more conversational again and more instantaneous back and forth, I think for us, has been a game changer.
Hmm. Interesting. I think that's cool because you sort of like removed both like constraints. I know sometimes email feels like a burden, like it's a thing you have to do versus like getting an opportunity to collaborate. So like tools like that. Any other tools or any other sort of things that you've put
Yeah.
into like level up on that?
So I mean, the video conferencing, we use that a ton within Teams, where we may be chatting back and forth through text, and then just pop open the video window and talk, because it's not. you don't have that office environment where you can just walk and go to someone else's cubicle and say, hey, I'm working on this thing, can you help me out? And so we do that all remotely now, and I feel like we're, I don't feel like we've necessarily solved all the problems of going from having an office to being remote, but we're making it work.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it was already part of the culture before, because I know that
It,
like the term of zoomed out, they're like, I can't do another video conference, but like you guys, it's like, yeah, we have to do a video conference,
it,
otherwise we wouldn't see anything.
yeah, and I mean, and I still, I mean, when I have, I mean, like today, I've had back-to-back Zoom, Zoom, Teams. What else have I used today? All the video platforms, just nonstop, and definitely get zoomed out. I mean, and something else that we do, I mean, when we schedule meetings, I mean, we'll try to schedule a 30-minute meeting if we can, rather than always blocking an hour. Um, and we're always very conscious of each other's time to say, hey, if we can get this done in 10 minutes and give you either 20 minutes of that 30-minute block, or whatever portion of that block of time to give back, then we absolutely try to do that, and not, I don't want to say waste our time, but I mean, we don't take time just to take time because we schedule an hour for it.
Yeah, well, I think it points to the entrepreneurial nature of the business to say like, hey, everybody's aware of each other's of their own resources, because why would you take more time than is needed? But also like the consideration of others to say, hey, like that teamwork piece of it is like everybody's got stuff going on. Just because I can't see your stuff doesn't mean you don't have stuff. And I think the awareness and the understanding and the partnership of that is super key, like within your organization.
Yeah, yeah, and I would say that that's a, we talked earlier about that, as a leader, as a manager, I really am only good up to 20, 25 employees, and I think that that's part of the reason for that, is because I just assume everybody's going to do their job,
Hmm.
and that trust is there from the beginning, and that we're all busy, you're all going to go do your jobs, nobody needs to manage you. And the more people and the more layers of management that are put in place, then that does that trust level goes down, that interpersonal connection goes down, and oh, bless you. um, and so I think that that's a part of the reason that I'm not great in a larger team.
Hmm. No, that makes sense. Do you have formalized values as a company? Just out of
We
curiosity.
do.
Okay.
We absolutely do. So CRST are our core values. So it's customer first, respect, solution oriented, transparent. Where I missed one, but yes.
Do you, because you're hiring remotely, has that been a useful tool to like set
it,
norms? Like, how did you get
it,
everybody around on the same page if they're across the country?
Yeah, so I mean, we start there. We start with those core values, and that transparency and respect are two of the biggest of those. Um, and when you start out with that as, here's our core values, here's what we believe in, here's the CEO and founder that you can ask him anything at any point, you're expected to go do your job, here's the things you need to do, if there are problems or tools that you don't have or headaches in the way, talk to the team, and let's work through it.
Hmm, got that. Cool. So like setting that up, like I think it sounds like for you, the expectations and like laying it out on the table for your people not only helps them be successful and effective, but also help you be successful and effective, to the level that you're comfortable. Like, okay, here's everything on the table, guys and gals, like work within these parameters, and it helps everybody like move the company forward.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And one other thing that we implemented, probably, this has probably been 4 years ago or so. We have an unlimited vacation policy. So we don't have a set amount of paid days off. I mean, it's unlimited, but with the respect, like, you have to respect your other employees. So if you're like, okay, I'm just taking off for 6 months, well, that doesn't work. And it's actually one concern that I had, because our team, and we were even smaller of a team at that point. We're 9 now, so we're still very small. But at that point, we were even smaller and a very dedicated team. And one of my concerns that people would not take any vacation. And so we have a minimum, rather than having a maximum of how much vacation you can take, we have a minimum amount you have to take 2 weeks a year.
Hmm. And that works for morale and works for
It,
burnout and all that stuff?
yeah, well, yeah. I don't know. There's still burnout,
Okay.
but at least, I mean, it changes the mindset of what vacation is and what that taking a day off means, because it's not like you have this 3 weeks or 15 days or whatever it is your set amount of days off that you normally would be able to take, where you hold those like gold, and you don't take them until you absolutely need to, or when you do, you're like, okay, this is my time, I'm taking off and I'm out. And so kind of the opposite can happen on the burnout side, where people then don't, because you don't feel like you take any time for yourself then necessarily. So that's something that we talk about, and why we have the minimum of 2 weeks that you have to take, because yeah, I mean, people will just not, and then get burnt out, and yeah.
And then it causes more problems. No, I got that.
Right, right.
If we switch gears a little bit, what in this, I mean, you've been leading companies for what, 20 something years now. What were some of the, like, those key learnings, those like, oh, expletive moments where you're like, damn, like I really should have done that different? What are some of the things that you'd like to tell
I,
our listeners?
so I think the biggest, so I bought at one point, in 2006, I bought a competitor out and so this was in the managed services, IT consulting business. It bought a competitor out that but actually they were larger than we were, so more than doubled the size of our team, and they had a very strict structure in place of the kind of the traditional employee boss kind of mentality. And that was a shocking change for me and for them, and it didn't go well, honestly. I mean, it was something where I tried to ease the employees that we brought on into our culture, and tried to change our culture a little more, tried to come to the middle,
Mm-hmm.
and it did not go well.
What
I,
was the result? Like, if you're
um,
open to telling it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so the result was I ended up having to sell off a portion of the business, and it didn't lose a huge amount of money, but sold it for a lot less than the value of it, and just had to kind of reorganize, and it was not as successful as it could have been. So it wasn't like it was a complete failure, but it wasn't as successful as it could have or should have been. And in retrospect, going in and just changing that organization that we bought, that was larger than we were, to our culture, and weeding out anyone that didn't, because it was obvious within the first 2 weeks who wasn't going to work in this environment. And had I just been more, which is not my nature necessarily, to be more of that fire, like I'm not one to just
Like a
fire
my
people.
way or the highway kind of,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, which is completely counter to our culture, right? But there are people that just don't survive. Like, some people need to be in an employee boss, or at least think that they do, environment, and that's not who we are. And I should have recognized that earlier and let the people go that I knew were never, like I say, I mean, within 2 weeks, I knew the people that weren't going to work, and should have just made changes right then.
Yeah, because it's one of the things that I wonder about in this, we're going to call it the COVID world, the virtual work world, that there's some
Yep.
people who just, they need that they need that, they need to be able to be seen, they need to be in the office, they need to be like in that world, and they sort of thrive under set conditions. But it'd be interesting
It,
to see how that changes over the next like weeks and months as this becomes like less than like a small disruptive blip and more of like the future of how it goes. How do you see it?
yeah, so I mean, I see that it's sort of it's kind of hard for me to see that because we've been living it already. You know, I mean, we were already doing it, so that wasn't like a hard change for us. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see, and I'm not exactly sure how that will play out. I think the way, honestly, I think the way that it will play out is that so assuming that a vaccine comes out and we get back to some sort of normalcy, there'll be companies that have the traditional structure, and there'll be companies that have this new totally remote structure, and they're going to figure it out one way or the other. Some will be able to do a combination. I don't think that we could go back to a combination. I think that we're all remote now, and we've figured out how to make that work, and we're going to keep making that work, and we're going to hire people that work in that environment. That's not for everyone. So I think that there'll be three different sets of kinds of companies: the ones that have a traditional office and everybody goes to the office, combination, have an office, have some remotes, and then have all remote.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't see it as a one size fits all.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, for a company in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, the fact that you can get talent from across the country and compete across the country, it's going to be, in my opinion, a great equalizer because you have all the, the companies in the Bay, downsizing, companies in New York, not downsizing, but, realizing that they can diversify and balance out their talent pool and take less overhead and create like more nimble companies if they want to be that. Not saying they all have to be because some won't thrive there, right?
Right, right.
Um, just as we sort of begin to wrap up here, one of the things that you had mentioned, early on when we started was going from like a technical guy to a leader and hiring more and more people and getting to that 20-person cap. What was that journey for you? Did you intentionally work on your leadership? Did it sort of happen as you needed
It,
it? And what were the things that you did to
yeah.
elevate your capacity to lead?
So, I mean, a combination of all those things. So, really, I would say having some great mentors along the way was a massive help. So, or very early on, I was naive and arrogant enough to think, oh, I can just go do this, and built up to I believe 14 employees between um, 1998 and about 2002 2003 timeframe, um, and I really was hating it. I I mean was successful, more successful than had ever been. I was about to turn 30, maybe a little before 30, which was, at the time I thought was this huge age number that I was hitting, and I was miserable. Honestly, I mean, and wasn't being a good leader, and so had some mentors that kind of kicked me in the ass and said, hey, I mean, you are successful. You're doing exactly what you set out to do. You just now have to learn to be a leader. And so helped to shepherd me through that transition. And I probably read more self-help books and leadership books than 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 are healthy, but good, all good. You take the pieces from all of those and make them your own, and that's really what I did and what I've done over the last 22 years.
You got to learn it somehow, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And I think taking action is, as an entrepreneur and as a leader, what you have to do. I mean, making the decision is more important than what the decision is. Making that decision, living by it, learning from your mistakes, not being afraid to say, I made a mistake, I'm sorry, yeah, I was wrong, taking those and turning it around and learning from it all.
yeah, failing fast, as they say. Um,
Absolutely.
your mentor relationships, formal or informal?
Informal. All there's one that's key that is a little more formal. I mean, like we have a once a month CEO mentoring session, and he was a successful CEO and grew a company and now runs the Entrepreneurial Development Center out of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. So that's a little more formal, but it's still not like formal.
Yeah. I think it's really important.
Yeah.
Like, what you pointed to, Greg, is neat. Like the taking time to learn it. As an entrepreneur, we have to do that. Like there's no one else who's going to teach you. But even as a
Right.
middle manager, you gotta go to school. School never stops. And so
Oh
having
yeah.
somebody who's there for you is just super valuable. It sounds like it's made a big difference for you.
Absolutely. And people ask, and maybe early on I didn't, like I say, I mean, early on I didn't have mentors, and then figured out, okay, I'm not as smart as I think I am. I'm way too arrogant and need to, rein that in a little bit. But then how do you go find a mentor? And the way I did it is just ask and go. I mean, there's plenty of people out there that are willing to be mentors, but you have to go ask.
Yeah. No, it's just gonna be like, can I be your mentor? Can I be your mentor? Um, That's awesome. Greg, how can people learn more? Actually, why don't you tell us a little bit about CryptoStopper as a company, and then tell us how we can get in touch with you and learn more about what you
Sure.
do.
So the company is CryptoStopper, and our website is getcryptostopper.com. And the product stops actively running ransomware. So we have this massive problem that's worldwide of ransomware and these cyber attackers that are making billions of dollars a year encrypting people's files and holding for ransom. That's all ransomware does. It just encrypts, and then they hold that password for ransom. And so what we created is a tool that identifies that actively running ransomware attack once it's gotten past all the other security that companies already have in place. And so now this attack is actively running and destroying the network. We recognize that in less than a second and correlate it to how it's happening and kill
Sweet. That sounds cool. I mean, not cool if it's happening, but
it.
cool if you've
it
got it in place and to
it
protect
it
yourself.
yeah, it's absolutely cool, and cool for me personally when we stop a ransomware attack. We just stopped one week before last in a law firm that it would have chewed through, it would have shut them down completely. And actually, um, during my offsite, so the company previous to this that I owned was an offsite backup and disaster recovery company. 20% of our clients were hit with ransomware between 2012 and 2015. And that was just seeing that devastation, even when companies had a good solution to recover to. So we were in the backup business and get them back up and running, but it was massive disruption to their companies to have to go through that disaster recovery. I mean, you build disaster recovery for flood, tornado, hurricane, and we took care of those. But when all of your competitors around you aren't down because there's not a hurricane that happened, but it's just ransomware that took you out, then it's even worse, honestly. I mean, not that one ransomware attack is worse than a hurricane. Not saying that, but worse for that individual business.
Yeah, that just show how important the continuity piece of it is, not just because of the pain and time and money, energy that you have to go through to like get back up, but just like the delay on the business. And like, in a fast paced, highly competitive business, you can't let your competitors get
Yeah,
ahead of you. So
yeah. I mean, ransomware will shut a business down in a matter of hours. I mean, and they're down. I mean, basically go shut off the internet connection and your all your data files,
yeah,
and
and then you're SOL.
yeah, yep.
Well, not to make light of it, but if
It
before that happens, talk to Greg and then he'll sort you out.
right. Yes, absolutely.
Greg, where can people get a hold of you if they want to reach out to you if they need a mentor?
Yeah, so if they want to reach out to me personally, it's gedwards@getcryptostopper.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Greg. It's been a pleasure having you on the show today. And yeah, I hope you save a lot of people from headache of ransomware attacks.
We will. Thanks for having me, Anthony.
It's my pleasure, bud. Ladies and gentlemen, thank my guest, Greg Edwards, who is the CEO at CryptoStopper. So if you know somebody in your life who is growing their entrepreneurial business and want to learn some mistakes and some lessons from Greg, please be sure to share the episode with them. If you like today's episode, please consider rating us 5 stars on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Once again, my name is Anthony Taylor, and this has been the Strategy and Leadership Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us, and until next time.